on some of the responses in the chat. I think next time we might have to do something a bit more, but so we can see where things are coming through. But yeah, I definitely see that 2 is coming through really strongly around kind of balancing professional and personal lives, but also quite a bit of 4 as well around progression. So it feels like a lot of us really do want to kind of progress and get new experience, but obviously again balance that with what else is going on in our personal and professional lives as well. So lots of themes that I'm sure we'll pick up during the course of the next 55 minutes or so. So we are going to be focusing our webinar today on the themes around the differing factors that influence on career choices. I'm sure this is something that we can all resonate with. There's obviously a number of factors that have influenced our current and historic career choices, and I'm sure our future career choices as well. So you might be one of these people, I probably put myself in this category to be honest, one of these people who is quite opportunity driven when it comes to your next role, or you could be really focused and have a really clear view of where you want to get to and the steps that you're going to take to get there. But either way, I'm sure there'll be barriers and obstacles along the way. So we'll be discussing some of those themes this afternoon. I'm really pleased to be joined today by Jenny Ehrhardt, Hardev, Virdee and Hennah Khalfey. They're all going to be talking through their own personal experiences in this theme as well. And we'll spend a little bit of time to hear from them and their own stories. And then, as always, we can open up for questions. It's great to see so many of you here. As Nicola says, if you're not presenting, if you don't mind keeping yourself on mute and keeping your cameras off for the time being, just so that we can see and profile our speakers. Obviously, when it comes to Q&A, feel free to put your cameras on and obviously ask your questions. So we'd love to hear from as many of you as possible, and we really want it to be an engaging session. We'll run with Q&A until around 5 to 1, and then we'll start to conclude the session. But obviously, a number of us will stay on afterwards anyway, just to kind of continue the discussion informally as needed. So why don't we get started? So Jenny, can I hand over to you first for your intro, a little bit about yourself, your career choices and barriers or obstacles that you've had to overcome. Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks, Sarah. And it's a real privilege to be here. So thank you for inviting me. So my name's Jenny Ehrhardt. I'm the Group Chief Finance Officer for Manchester Foundation Trust. I'm actually in my last month here now, so just obviously. I will be going to Leeds as Executive Director of Finance for Leeds Teaching Hospitals in August. So I've been I'm a career NHS accountant. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life when I was 17 or thereabouts. I really wanted to be a vet, so you can see how well that worked out. I ended up going to university to do maths because I like doing maths, and so I went for something that I enjoyed rather than knowing where it was taking me, if you like. And then out of university, I kind of worked out that I did want to work in public service. I had a number of colleagues at university and friends who were going into the city and were doing sort of legal stuff in great big firms for great big corporations and things, and I just didn't feel like something that would make me want to get out of bed in the morning, really. So I would say to all of you, the reason I come into work and the reason I like working in hospitals is because of the patients, and I very much see that I'm a servant, and I like being in a hospital where I can see the people that I serve in terms of our patients and our visitors and our staff. So I went off, worked in Manchester on the grad scheme, and then I did take 6 months off and go and work on a yacht in Greece, but that's probably not the key bit of my career to talk about. And then I've worked in various different elements of the NHS, really. So worked in the ambulance service, worked in the primary care trust, so that's a little while ago, and then back into acute, and worked in both kind of big tertiary places, and then in Harrogate District General Hospital, and then back into another big tertiary place into the Leeds, and then here. And I guess my most recent 3 jobs have each been 5 years. And I never planned that, but that's sort of, I bounced around a lot in my early career. I did a year here and 18 months and 2 years. But but actually then my director of finance, as I was leaving Wythenshawe Hospital for the first time, a woman called Nora Amhiri, she said to me, Jenny, just be careful how quickly you go up. And that was really sound advice, because what I'd done was gather lots of experience, but I needed to kind of consolidate that. And so I did then spend 5 years in Harrogate, and working in a place where you could really get your arms around everything, was really, really good experience for me. So I could see, treasury management over there and what the management accountants did over here, or what procurement did and how that impacted and how it all fitted together. So that was a really, really valuable advice, really. And I think that's probably one of the things I would say I've been looking, but I think I've gone looking for as well, is that support, that informal support. And at times, probably we didn't really talk about sponsors. Actually, looking back, I've had 2 or 3 really influential people who've been in rooms that I've not been in and have supported my progression in those rooms that I wasn't in. So some sort of key women, so like Nora Ann, but also I'd say Adrian Roberts, who was my predecessor in this role, and Tony Whitfield, who was Director of Finance in Leeds, really kind of key people who said, actually, she could be good. And so I guess from and I'm sure I hope people ask us questions, but from a bit of an advice perspective, actually people like me want to help. And that was like a really useful thing to kind of learn fairly early on in my career, was actually people want to be supportive. So if, when I said, oh, well, where would I go next, or what should I do next? Actually, there are people around all of us that want to help with that. So I would encourage people to kind of go looking for who those sponsors, those informal mentors might be. One of the things I thought about, and I've kind of pondered over whether to say this or not, but it is a reality, is about kind of maternity leave and time in a family. So I've got 2 daughters who are 8 and 12 now. And I did kind of think about what sort of level would I want to be at before I felt I wanted to go on maternity leave. Now, obviously, these sort of things don't happen like clockwork, do they? And you can't always time stuff. But I did, it was a kind of consideration. So actually, my 5 years in Harrogate, I had a year off on maternity leave. My 5 years in Leeds, that I'm going back to, I had a best part of a year off on maternity leave. So this 5 years has been the first 5 year stint I've actually worked the whole lot, if you like. Obviously, having a baby is fairly full on as well. But just having, a bit of that thought process, and I guess knowing that people do think about that might be useful. And then actually coming back from maternity leave in Harrogate was what prompted me to look for another role, because I came back as we started annual planning, and I kind of thought, crikey, I've done this 3 times before. What's new? And I think for me, in that, what is it that makes you look for the next opportunity? I think for me, it's about learning. And once I feel like I've got to a place where I sort of can do the role, then, well, what's next then? Where's my next stretch? And I think that's a big driver for me. And then it wouldn't be fair to say that I can do this on my own. So I've got an extremely supportive husband. His job means he can be flexible, he can move around. He works from home 100% of the time now, which isn't, this is post-pandemic. That wasn't what he was doing pre-pandemic, but he's been able to be more flexible for the kids than I have been. And I think that makes a massive difference, because we are still in a country probably that expects men perhaps more progress in their careers more than women do, and so things are set up, and there's things that really annoy my husband, like school will expect to ring mum, not dad, and actually that's not the case anymore for lots of families. So it's really it's really important, I think, that your balance in your life, whatever that looks like, just recognizing that I am not Superwoman. I have loads of support at home. My mum and dad are really involved, as well as my husband, and I'm just, I think, just being realistic. I think is really important as sort of as senior women. So I'll pause there. Like, I'm dead happy to I was saying in our kind of pre-meet, I'm happy to take questions on anything really. So, you know, when we get to that stage, fire away. So thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. And yeah, I'm sure there'll be lots of questions once we've got into that part. But let me come next, if that's all right, to Hardev for a little bit of an intro and what has influenced your career choices too, Hardev. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Wow, I'm really in great company here. Slightly intimidated, I have to say, but it's good to be here. Good to see so many familiar faces and names as well. So I'm Hardev. I'm the Group Chief Finance Officer at Barts. I'm also the chair of the NHS Finance Academy. So that's really helpful. And like Jenny, we help support One NHS Finance and all the work that goes on there. So it's a great privilege to be here. I thought I would start off by just reflecting a bit on some of the decisions and key points in terms of career, but I'm also aware that a lot of you have probably heard my career story over and over and over again. So I do apologize for those who are quite familiar with that, but I'll try to keep it as a bit more succinct and a bit more punchy on the key points. So it's safe to say, starting out in my early days, I was born in Birmingham and life was a bit tough. Education was really tough. I grew up in a really deprived area, low income, very different to other people who I encountered later in my career. But I went to what was officially classed as the worst school in the country, which was eventually closed down. And so growing up for me, I think was tough. And the older I got, the more I psychologically felt I didn't fit in for all sorts of reasons. And a lot of that baggage I carried with me as well. And I'm sure there's lots of people on this call as well who find that transition as they're going through either education institutions or through work organizations, that do they really fit in? Do they feel that they can really blend in? And I personally found that really challenging. I found that difficult at university, largely because everyone there who I encountered had come from sort of what I would call a better upbringing than I had, and you know, I struggled to make connections and have that relevance with people, but I managed to get through that. And as I then started looking for a career, I began working in banking in a big corporate bank, and it was a very male-dominated Thursday afternoon. You're in the pub and you don't come out until Friday type of culture. It was very, very different. And as someone who had come out of university, it was a great culture, I thought. But then you get to the point where you start thinking about, is this really what you want to do with your life? And at the same time, I managed to get a place onto the NHS graduate scheme, and this corporate bank had offered me lots of perks, and I had a decision to make. And so this is for me a key point on reflection now, where I assessed my values about what is it that I valued in my career. And I thought, you know, I could go down a road of waking up in the gutter and, you know, just constantly having a different type of environment, or I could actually add value back into society. But also for me, it was this piece around equity. How am I living that value of providing equal access? And for me, that equal access was coming through healthcare, because I didn't feel I had it in education and in all sorts of other aspects. So I felt psychologically that my contribution will be around improving the equity of healthcare. So that's that realization of values became apparent at that early stage. And then working through my career, I exactly like Jenny, I had the same advice by someone where I was pushing myself through, and I was offered a director role at a very, very, very young age, and the best advice I had was someone said, you know, what's the rush? It's not going to be all that when you're there. Take your time. So I turned that opportunity down based on that advice, and it was the best advice I had. And just really consolidate your experience, really focus on yourself and improving yourself. And to that extent, I went to a number of events and tried to increase my profile. And at one event, I had this very senior regional finance person come up to me, and they asked me at this event, can I be your mentor? And I was really struck by this. I thought, normally it's the other way around. I normally should be asking people to be my mentor. What? This is a bit odd. So I thought, it's great. This is a very sort of senior person. I'm going to say yes. And you know, we worked together for a while. But in the back of my head, I kept wondering, why did he ask me? So by a fourth or fifth session, I asked him, I said, look, why did you come up to me and ask me to be my mentor? What was that about? And his response was, he goes, you were different. I could see that you stood out, and you're not the same as everyone else. And I was still trying to process this about, but why did you feel you had to do something? And I worked out eventually that and this is many, many, many years ago, he was one of the first senior finance people that was coming out as gay. And he was struggling to fit in. And he saw me as struggling to fit in, and he thought we would have that connection. And it was a really interesting chat we had about this, around that concept of trying to be someone and live as someone else, and what that means in terms of your expectations and how you behave and how you respond. And that stuck with me for a long time, particularly as I transitioned from moving to Birmingham to London. And it was at that time as I was moving my roles, I took the opportunity to change my name. I tried to lose my Birmingham accent, which, you know, I still try, but for different reasons. And then I changed lots of aspects of my life, because I presumed that's what people were looking for me to be like, to progress in my career. I wouldn't be giving that advice now. I would obviously be talking more about understanding what your authentic self looks like and feels like, and being comfortable with that. But I did struggle quite a lot with that. And the reason I felt, I think I struggled with that, was because I didn't have any role models. I really was looking around for people, a very senior position that could speak in a Birmingham accent, that you know, looked like me and could behave like me, came from the same background, and it wasn't there. So I think that's why I thought I needed to change, because I felt like I wanted to be like everyone else, and that's not a good place to be in. So there is something there about understanding who your role models are, and what that looks like, and what does that mean for yourself. So that's the second bit. First bit is values, understanding your values. Second bit is understanding the role models. And then as I worked my way through my career in the NHS, similar to Jenny, worked in all sorts of organisations, commissioning, regulatory, and provider. But what was interesting is when I as a director of finance in a CCG, commissioning organisation, I wanted to move into provider organisation, and more than one recruitment agency, nothing to do with Nicola. Nicola was I hadn't spoken to Nicola at that time, but other agencies had said to me, you can't do that at a board level. You can't move from a commissioning organisation to provider organisation at board level. And that bit of me, which comes from all my childhood, which is when someone tells me I can't do something, I become really determined to prove them wrong. And so I did. And then I was working in a mental health organisation, and I wanted to move into an acute organisation. And again, number of people told me you can't do that at the board level. So I went from central northwest London to Barts, and working here in Barts as one of the largest providers in the country, not having that much acute experience was quite a shock for many people. But it's about having that determination that actually, despite what people think, how are you going to make that difference? How are you going to really inspire others as well? And I'm fortunate now at this stage in my career that my focus is on building the platforms for other people, and to leave a legacy, and make sure that we have role models, and make sure that people are able to be their authentic self and have good values. And then the final bit for me really is, on reflection coming into this conversation, I had a look back I made a list of all the chief execs I worked with, and by far, 6 of them were women, which is more or less 90%. And there were other women who I listed down as having key impact on my career. I was trying to work out why is it that I've tended to work more with female chief execs and have more female sort of career-changing moments around me. And I think a lot of it is about the way of thinking being different and adding something different that I couldn't see. And certainly I think that's helped me. And so the third point for me is as well as having good set of values and having role models, is having good people around you that will inspire you, that will make you think differently and push you to do different things. And I think with that helps those career choices come to life. But those would be my sort of 3 learning points around my career. But happy as well to take any questions.
Thank you, Hardev. And yeah, I'm sure we'll definitely have lots of questions. Really helpful to kind of hear those 3 elements. Yeah, and absolutely resonates. I'm sure it does with a number of our audience members here. Let me come next to Hennah, if that's okay, for your intro and a little bit about yourself, Hennah. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. Just want to say, Jenny and Hardev, they're really inspirational stories and really touching. And I think I can resonate with some of the points that you've both said. So again, I'm a fellow graduate trainee. So I graduated off the graduate scheme in 2008, and then following that, worked in a number of London trusts, including Barts, which was the first job I had after coming off the graduate scheme, which was a big crash into reality. I think they only had a 50 million deficit at that point, but it was a real amazing place to work at the time. And that was an invaluable experience for me, actually, to hit the ground running, trying to make difficult decisions, and seeing the provider sort of difficult finance decisions that had to be made. And at that time in my career, sort of didn't have many responsibilities. I think I was just newly married, no children. So I was able to do the long hours and things that were required. And I learned a huge amount at that time. So a really, really important part of my career, and then subsequently worked in another London trust at the Marsden. Again, really, really good to work in a provider. But I felt at that point I needed to get a bit more of a strategic experience. So then I moved to Monitor. So again, loved the experience there. We worked across the Southwest. I used to do loads of traveling and work in different providers, sort of in a regulatory space. And for me, the biggest challenge then was I'd often be in a boardroom full of, you know, very senior executives, mainly at the time, being in the Southwest, would be white male execs, sort of probably not wanting to see me at the other end of the table, questioning them about compliance and various different issues. And I think at that time in my career, being quite early on, I did sort of struggle with sort of challenging people that I thought were more experienced than me. But actually, it was such a good opportunity for me to understand how to have those difficult conversations with people that were more experienced and just trying to understand tasks and understand questions and give me the confidence into myself and the questions I was asking. So actually having that experience with people around the table was really interesting, and having those sort of more difficult conversations. Monitor then turned into NHS Improvement, and our sort of way of working very much changed. And then I moved on to NHS England. So this has sort of been my longest stretch in terms of my career. So I'm now head of finance at for Kent and Medway and Sussex within NHS England. And I've been here around 5 years. Within that 5 years, I've also had 2 children. So I've got a 4-year-old and a 16-month-old. So I've just recently returned from maternity leave. So similar to Jenny in terms of that's been my longest stretch. But I think for me, the reason I've sort of stayed here is because I've had an amazing sort of role models in terms of women who have had children, sort of had really flexible working, have done job shares, and a really, really supportive line manager who's allowed me to come back from maternity leave and do flexible hours, use my annual leave so I can accommodate childcare. And I think for me, that's been really, really important in this stage of my career. So it's allowed me to balance having children and my career at the same time. Whereas I think early on, I was much more focused on trying to get the experience to try and progress. And I think the main thing for me from the question that Nicola asked at the beginning is some of the things that influence can change throughout different times in your career. And it's not to say that if you choose one over the other, it's I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. You just have to do what suits you at that time in your life. So I am actually really happy where I am at the moment, seeing how young my little one is. And I would just want to reflect that whilst I've been on maternity leave, I've spoken to a lot of mums returning to work who aren't really confident or aware of what they can ask for in terms of flexible working. And I think I was lucky enough to have the role models who, you know, used to leave early to do pickups and, you know, would request flexible hours. And I was able to sort of gain confidence and seeing how they manage their time and manage the work situation for me to request that. And I was lucky enough I had a line manager who also accepted it. And I think it's really, really important to sort of ask the question if you want to have sort of flexible working, or if you want to sort of change the way you work, because I think a lot of people, unless they see it played out, won't assume that they can ask for it and maybe are slightly reluctant. But there are lots of, you know, teams out there that are willing to accommodate you. So don't not go for a role, or not, you know, return to work or not ask for things. I think it's really important to do that. And just in terms of what I look for and what's worked for me in my career in terms of the organisations I've picked or the type of roles I've gone for, I think the most important thing for me has been where I've had a good team that's been really supportive and good team working. I think if you have a supportive team, that will take care of you in a way, and you take care of each other. So I think reflecting on where I've progressed the most in my career, it's where I've had line managers that will invest the time to do PDPs with me, and we can have those genuine conversations about, you know, how to progress. And I think that for me has been the most important thing. So yeah, that's just a little snapshot on me, and how happy to take questions.
Thank you. Thanks all three of you for fantastic introductions. Actually, there's enough material there for you to run a webinar, each one of you in your own right, actually talk about your experiences. But I really like, there's some really good common themes coming through, and I've got some questions, and then hopefully the rest of the audience can ask some more. But especially around support from others that I think all three of you mentioned, and role models. We also, there was a lot of, I think, shared experiences that you've had around making the decision to work for a place that shares your values, and also where you can consolidate your experience rather than jumping too soon. And all of you have faced barriers, and and to varying extents, very different barriers actually. But thanks for sharing them so openly. In fact, you're all like Olympic athletes, the amount of hurdles that you've had to jump over in your career. But also, I think that's why we run these webinars, and many of our audience have been in similar situations themselves, and sometimes don't realise other people will have faced that too. So thanks for sharing. So a question from me really. Actually, both Hardev and Jenny spoke about support that other people gave them or wanted to support them. Hardev's example was being approached by someone, and Jenny's was people spoke about her in a room that she wasn't there. Possibly, Hennah, that's also happened to you as well. But when the boot's on the other foot, and when you guys are now in a position where you can help other people, what do you look for to be able to support or mention those people in a room when they're not present, if that makes sense? So I'm just thinking of what can our audience do to help themselves be picked by Hardev or by someone, or be supported by you in a conversation if they're not there. Shall I actually ask Jenny first, if that's okay?
Yeah, sure. So I think some of it is knowing that somebody is looking to move on. Now, sometimes people sort of don't know their own strengths. So it's for people like me to say, actually, tap people on the shoulder and say, I think you'd be really good at, whatever, if there's an opportunity. But it is also helpful if somebody says, actually, I'm looking for my next move, or, and trying to, so I guess in terms of what can somebody do, knocking on a door can be quite daunting, but is also, I genuinely think you're very rarely going to find someone who's not going to open it and say, come in, so because I think that's what the NHS finance community does really, really well. I think we are really a supportive community, and I hope people have experienced that. So I think there is putting your hand up and asking, but then I think there's, I strongly feel that part of my job is developing, really is about developing my team. And there's some of my team on, so you never know, they might stick their hand up and say, hang on, that's not how it's felt. And I hope that is how it's felt. So, but please do let me know if that's not how it's felt, because that I need to understand that, and I need that feedback. But, we have a staff conference twice a year, and encouraging people to stand up and say, this is what I do in my bit of the world, because actually we're a big organisation and people don't know what other bits of the finance team do. And so, me kind of saying that you'll be really good at, and it's a really nice audience, and cut your teeth on. So I think it's that balance really of, seeking out those opportunities. And it might be that actually the door of the next person up in your organisation might not be the right door, and it might be somebody somewhere else. So building your own networks. And that might just be somebody that you used to sit next to who's moved on to another organisation. It doesn't have to be attending loads of conferences or something, but I mean, I think you should do that if you get those opportunities. You should taking those is good. So yeah, I'll stop waffling there. I guess for me, it's not knocking on doors and asking for help, but also when somebody says, I think you'd be good at, doing your best to kind of step into that, because again, that can be daunting. So if I say it'd be great if you stood up in front of this conference, if you kind of think, oh cracky, that sounds awful, actually what support do you need to ask for from me, or from from somebody else to help you do that thing that feels really cracky, and that'll be a bit scary on the day. Because to be honest, standing up in front of my team conference is scary on the day for me. So it's not I don't think any of us sort of feel like all of this is easy at all. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for that. And I think all three of you said that you were lucky with some of the choices that you have, and I think also some of that some of it is luck, but some of it is you make your own luck and you put yourself in those positions. And part of the reason why we wanted today, the speakers here, we have a range of different experiences, so we could see that as well. So if I could ask you, Hennah, the same question. I appreciate you're not a CFO, but you probably are in a position where other people, you can still champion people that are at the slightly lower level as well, or grad trainees coming through as well.
Yeah, for me, I think it's just someone that shows willing and that wants to sort of progress, and someone that, you know, puts themselves out there. I think that really does help. It shows that, you know, you want to, and like I said, you know, I've sort of tried to mentor women that I've met along the way during maternity leave, for example, and try to coach them in how to, you know, utilize the opportunities they have, and coach them in having those difficult conversations. So I think that's, you know, speaking to people that are sort of wanting to progress or do something differently, and having just that conversation and being willing to speak to them. I think it's quite important, and showing that.
Thank you. That's brilliant, and I'm sure that's really useful for those that are in that position. Because again, if you don't know someone that's done that and got a successful outcome by asking for flexible working, you're not sure that, you know, it's a good question to ask or not. I'm sure there'll be some questions coming through, so please do think about questions that you want to ask our panel today and pop them in the chat function. Then I can, or put your hand up, and then we can come round to you. But Hardev, if I could still ask the same question to you, around what do you look for in those that you would support in the future?
Yeah, I think Jenny captured it really well by the knocking on the door bit. I think I took that to an extreme when I was younger, and I ended up stalking a person who I wanted to speak to and get career advice, to the point I managed to get them into my car and was on verge of kidnapping. But it was a good ploy to get some good advice, and it helped. So really, I think the point is, you know, people do want to help, and finance leaders in particular are very keen, because it's actually probably the most interesting part of the role, is helping people. So take advantage of that. And then probably the only other bit is, I'm keen to talk to people who are stuck. I think that word comes up a lot, where people are stuck in careers, but also are willing to take a risk, because I think you'll tend to find that risk is actually not really a significant risk. And there's bits in there about confidence and all sorts, but someone who's open to having that discussion and looking at that there are opportunities out there, put them. My job is to put them in the driving seat of their career, and help them get the most out of themselves. But yeah, always starting off by knocking on that door would be a good start.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I'm glad you didn't get arrested for the stalking, that you're still here to tell the tale. So I think we've got a question from Clemmy, who's put her hand up. Do you want to put your video on and ask the question, Clemmy? Oh, are you there? Otherwise, we can ask. There's a couple of questions that have come through on the chat. Oh, there she is. I can hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just had problems coming off mute. Hi, I'm Clemmy. I'm a finance manager at BART. So Hardev's one of my leaders, and he's really inspirational. And thank you, Hardev, for going through your career. But my question was actually to Jenny. There were two things that you said that really resonated with me. And one of them was, you don't want to climb the ladder too quickly. You want to get that experience and really get that knowledge before you start climbing the ladder. And then a couple of sentences later, you mentioned how you also had to really think about at what point you take maternity leave, and making sure you were the level you want to be at before you take that maternity leave. And I was just wondering how you balanced both of those things, along with the sort of natural pressure of wanting to have children at a time that you see fit. It's quite a lot of moving parts. So I was just wondering how you prioritized all of that.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess early in my career, I'd done about a year with the ambulance service, a couple of years with in commissioning, but I was doing technical accounts in commissioning. So it was the technical accounts bit I was doing more than the commissioning organisation bit, really. And then I've done 18 months back in an acute. And I think I'd learnt lots of bits, and I'd seen you sometimes work for somebody that you recognise what you wouldn't do that they do, as much as what what you can learn that's positive. So I'd seen that in a finance director who had, well, she had a really strong deputy, and the deputy was really technically strong, and the finance director really was not. And if the deputy had wanted to play games, she could have done. Now she didn't, so that was kind of lucky. But I didn't want to be in the place that finance director had put herself in. So I wanted to do technical accounts for a bit. And even though like I can balance stuff to the penny, but that's really, I'd rather talk about tens of thousands or bigger numbers. So I think I'd kind of thought, well, getting to kind of deputy level might be the right sort of level, and then think, well, you've got to a kind of seniority, and then maybe have children. I mean, like it was sort of a thought I'd had rather than a beautifully defined plan. But it did land like that for me, for us as a couple. And I kind of think, I'd done probably 2.5 years, 3 years in that deputy role at Harrogate before I got pregnant. And I think that sort of I consolidated those jumping about bits of learning. But I'd also established myself at that level. Now, that's how it worked for me. I don't think there's a right or wrong in this. And there are so many other moving parts, particularly sort of starting a family isn't necessarily something that you can just say you're going to do and then it happens, is it? So, I think it's, but I guess I felt like I've been in that role long enough that I had that sort of grounding in that role, and I had the real support from that organisation. Others will have experienced it. We lost our first pregnancy very early, and so actually I really needed that emotional support and sort of employer support, as well as feeling that I had a sound professional footing to come back to as well. So yeah, I hope that's answered the question. I'm not sure.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that question. It's a great question, Clemmy. And something that so hard to answer. It's, getting the timing right for those decisions. There's a question. I'm just going to go back to the chat function. Louise asked a question. I don't know if you want me to ask it on your behalf, Louise. I'll put your video on if you're there. Oh yeah, there she is.
Hi, sorry, I was having problems on mute like the last speaker. I think I've got to the point in my career I'm really not sure. I sort of have had more senior roles, and then I've got to a level and I've sort of maybe not as senior as I was. Lost a little bit of confidence along the way. And I'm just wondering, do you think a mentor is the best way to sort of talk through, what my next move should be, what would be best in my career and life? Is that your kind of experience, that somebody like that is a good person? It's a good way of finding out what I want to do next and what would help.
Who wants to answer that question? Hardev, or take a stab at that?
I can do, yeah. So Louise, the first thing I'd say is it's really helpful to talk. So that's the main thing. I think a mentor would be helpful, but also have alongside that a coach as well. And there's nothing wrong with having two. I don't see any problems with that. What I would say is a lot of this, when you talk it through, is more about how you're feeling and where you feel either levels of frustration or levels of aspiration where you want to get to. And it's just trying to figure out, what does that jigsaw look like, and what pieces have you got and what pieces do you need? So you definitely would benefit from having those conversations. And when you come to finding a mentor, I would recommend that you actually be quite specific. And I always advise people, do you want, would it work best with a male or female? How senior? What type of organization? Is there anyone that you've seen that we can help to put in touch with them? and try it out. Don't, you know, it's not a case of once you've spoken to someone, it has to be that person. So organisations like One NHS Finance, the Finance Academy and HFMA, they have lists of mentors as well who can help with that and find you the right person. So it's all possible, Louise. I think it's just, I would say, maximise the opportunity with having a mentor and a coach. Thank
you. It's really helpful.
Excellent, thank you. I think Sophie's very patiently had her hand up. Sophie Pallett, would you like to ask the question now? Thank you.
Thanks, Nicola. No, just reflecting on some of the questions you asked at the start, Nicola, about what motivates you in your career choices and about culture and values. And I was just reflecting on, it feels quite tough in that space in NHS finance at the moment. And personally, I'm seeing too many behaviours and language that would drift into, I think, what Hardev describes, some of the sort of boys' club type behaviours and language that you saw in the banking days. I think I'm seeing too many pockets of that, and it feels quite tough at the moment. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts on what we can collectively and personally, individually do to try and steer away from that and into a more compassionate, inclusive kind of culture and values space. Sorry, I know, quite a big tough question. But I wondered if you had any thoughts.
It's a great question though, and you know, I think Hardev touched on authentic leadership styles earlier. I think the whole panel has talked about that. I think it's really important. Who wants to answer Sophie's question?
Can I start? I wouldn't want to say I could finish, but I mean, I think I recognise what you're saying, and I think that's not, you know, it's something that people in positions like those of us that are speaking now need to call out. And actually, where people feel safe to, I think it would be good if everybody could call that out. Now, it's not always, you know, it's doing that in a managed way, and perhaps, you know, it's a quiet conversation after a meeting, and, you know, when you said that this is how it came across, is that what you meant? You know, now that's quite it's a brave thing to do, and I think, you know, sort of working out how and if that feels something that's possible is important as an individual. But equally, I think, you know, one of the things I wrote down as others were speaking was that piece about people see, you know, people see what we do. We can say lots of things, but people see what we do and how we really act rather than what the words might be. And so I think that's something that's really important as leaders that we keep in mind all the time. And to be fair, anybody probably above a band 3 or 4 is a leader. And so that's, you know, it's for all of us to be as best we can in the situation we're in, to be working in that, you know, in modelling the behaviours that we would want to see, perhaps not passing on behaviours that we see from others. And, you know, actually, if I witness a behaviour in somebody else that's, you know, somewhere else, that I might choose not to challenge that behaviour, but I think it's absolutely incumbent on me not to pass it on. And so how each of us, as the leaders that we are, wherever we are in the organisation, I think that's important. It is, you know, NHS finance is a really tough place to work at the minute, and none of us can shy away from that. And I think, you know, sort of stating that and giving that as a fact is important as well, because I don't think anybody chooses to work in the NHS for it to be easy. But at the minute it does feel particularly hard. But I think this is the time when it's tough, it's so important that teams come together and pull together, don't pull apart. And so just, you know, trying to do that all the time is tough in this environment, but I think that's what all of us need to be doing.
Thank you, Jenny. I would just say as well, I think it sometimes can be hard to call out behaviour, particularly if you're on that career ladder yourself and concerned about how it be perceived. And I was, when I first became a manager, the role models I had were all male, And in a very large recruitment company, then you take on a kind of male style of management. And now looking back on that, I think that's completely not who I am. And I've developed over the years a much more feminine style that's true to how I am and how I act. So I think stay true to yourself as well, Sophie. And what defines your values and how you act inside work and outside work. I think, Hennah, you had your hand up as well for that question.
Yeah, no, Sophie, I was just going to say, because I find early on in my career, I found myself in a similar situation. So I think, like Nicola said, I didn't necessarily always feel it was the right place to call that person out because of the impact it could have on my career. But I definitely stood my ground. And I think the more interactions I had with that particular person or type of people, the more confidence it gave me, just to have the confidence in what you're saying or what your thoughts are and not let them push you down. Because I think that type of character that's essentially what they're trying to get at, and if the more confidence you push back at them, they'll actually be more amenable, and they'll actually be trying to challenge you in that way, and then they'll be seeing you as more of an equal. And I think that's what you're trying to pull up, that you are different potentially, or not like them, but equal, and your values and your thoughts mean just as much, and just to continue to challenge them. Don't be pushed down. Yes, that would be my advice, actually. So it's helpful.
Thanks. Sarah, I was thinking we're almost at the end. I don't know if you want to do your wrap up now.
Yeah, the time's gone.
We could
so
stay on a little
quickly.
bit longer as well, because I'm sure there's some more questions. But yeah, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Nicola. Yeah, the time's gone really quickly. I can't believe we're almost up on the hour. Lots of themes coming through in the chat. I think it's always helpful to get the chat feedback as well, because it gives us some ideas for all of our next webinars. And I think we've got absolutely loads more to go at there. Lots of additional themes to come through. So let me just start by wrapping up by thanking Hardev, Hennah and Jenny for your contributions and your insights today. It's been really, really inspiring to hear all of your stories, and thank you again for being part of our panel. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you. We in the network are going to continue to kind of work up some of these themes. I know there's already a request there to follow up with some questions, so feel free to email us if that's helpful. We're going to be sticking around for a few more minutes on the call informally if we do want to kind of pick up on some of the themes, so really happy to spend some time just now to do that as well. Couple of other just things relating to the network. You'll all be aware, I'm sure, that we've got our next in-person event that's now an annual thing on the 10th of July. So hopefully you've all been able to register your interest if you're able to go, and we're looking to confirm the places in the next week. So hopefully wait to hear it from us by early next week. We're working up the agenda and obviously we'll share details of that as soon as we've got them confirmed, but it's looking like it's going to be a really exciting and insightful day in person in London at St Thomas's Hospital on the 10th of July. So look forward to seeing loads of you in person there. I'll conclude for this afternoon there. Thanks again, like I said, to Hardev, to Hennah and to Jenny. Really appreciate your contributions, and good to see everybody else. Thanks for your engagement, and hope you have a good rest of the day. Thank you.